Hi, this is David, and here's a quick walkthrough of the podcast processor tool or template. You can open it up and see the canvas underneath, and I'm going to walk you through how it works and some ideas to customize it. So the first step is that it takes in an audio file. You can put in a video file too, but that's what goes in here. There's a step straight afterwards to transcribe that with DeepGram Nova. If it is just one person talking, Whisper is currently a little bit more accurate. It can be faster too, but DeepGram has speaker diarization, which means you can see who's saying what. Elsewhere, what we do is we extract the speakers, but it's typically not, the raw transcript won't have the speaker names in it at this point, given the capabilities of DeepGram Nova today. So what we also have is two inputs, which you could generate based, if you wanted to. You could create an AI task here based on the transcript to generate this information about what we think the target audience is and what they're interested in. Something else here is context about what the podcast name is, who the host is, the guest, and it's useful to have anything else in here that might be misspelled or misheard by DeepGram, or anything that you really want to emphasize when it comes to writing the show notes, writing blog posts that come out of this, etc. But back to the significance of the target audience. That information is passed into one of the most important steps, probably the most important step in this flow, which is this one, the interesting takeaways. And what that is doing is that is taking in your transcript, it's taking in your context. It also takes in as an initial step the above this it'll put the target audience, and it extracts the most interesting takeaways, learnings, disagreements between the host and the guest. That often yields like some pretty interesting output, and it produces this really outline of like the key points from the podcast. If you putting your podcast and you want to see and you ultimately don't see some of the most interesting points or the things that you'd want to highlight, well, that might be because of how this is prompted here. So you're welcome to tweak this. You can also add more things, like I said, to the context or to the target audience, and then that'll come through here. And then we use these interesting takeaways in a lot of other places. The first is in writing or brainstorming some tweets. So we have tweets that are based on the context, the target audience, and those takeaways. Those are the only things that go in here, and that is and that's what generates these 10 tweets. The other thing that it feeds into is some title ideas, and title ideas are just take those takeaways. They also take the podcast chapters and highlights. So in addition to the interesting takeaways, we have a second step that takes in both you can see here, if I move this out, you can see that it takes in the transcript and the interesting takeaways to create an ordered list of like the most interesting pieces of the podcast from the transcript. And that is what is used to make the show notes, in addition to a few other things. But those highlights and the interesting takeaways is what goes into the title generation. So then that brainstorms 15 different titles here. Now this is a really interesting piece of the overall flow. And it takes in an example of the show notes that you'd like to use. In this case, this is an example from Pete Soderling's podcast Zero Prime, and you can see the format that it uses, and we first extract instructions from this. So basically we have an LLM writing instructions for an LLM on how to write show notes like this. So these instructions are then passed to this show notes draft block that takes into account those instructions. It takes the example, it takes the chapter highlights, it takes in a ton of context. You know, the context that we flagged, the interesting takeaways, the transcript, and it takes all of those together, and it writes show notes. So let's take a look at the prompt here. And the way that this works is that Claude in particular, but also GPT-4o and other models and O1 now are very good at recognizing different sections of input based on XML. So here what we could do is just connect all of those blocks and then just write the podcast show notes for the above podcast, follow the exact same format as the example show notes. We could do that, and it would probably work pretty well. But what we're doing here is trying to make this this prompt as bulletproof as we can, which helps by wrapping each of these inputs. These are input placeholders that get replaced with the content from the upstream blocks. By wrapping those inputs with XML tags, it helps to delimit and show this model, like, this is the transcript, this is context, these are interesting takeaways, etc. Like, and really helps it to like understand these, like the different inputs that you're passing it. And as a result, in one shot from there, it is able to write a very good show notes that is very similar to the example that we put in. So if you put in a different example, that will rerun these instructions, and it should be able to, based on these inputs, write show notes matching your example. Okay. The final section here is a section to draft blog posts. And the way it works is that there's an initial step to brainstorm potential ideas for blog posts. What are the different angles that, where can we take this podcast content, and how, like, what are interesting blog posts that we can write from it. And it brainstorms a bunch of different blog post structures, the different angles from the podcast. And then from there, it recommends a bunch of different ideas and the sort of structures of the blog post from that. And then we take those recommended ideas, and we have a very simple prompt to turn those into JSON. And the reason why we're turning it into JSON is because the next step of this process uses a batch, which is it's just a construct in Hunch that allows you to run many of the same tasks in parallel with different inputs. In this case, each input is a blog post title or a blog idea, and so you can actually feed all kinds of things into a batch, and it'll be able to interpret it correctly, like a numbered list, blog posts, also bullets. It can even, based on different like paragraphs or like text chunks. It can split anything up into list items to run in parallel. But JSON is a more bulletproof way of doing that in something like this, which is a repeatable tool that we want to work 100% of the time, and we don't want people to have to rerun things if the first time it doesn't, like the LLM doesn't generate like properly formatted numbered lists or something like that. So generating JSON is like a good way of making sure that the batch runs extremely reliably. And what we can see here is there's two steps inside this batch. There's planning the blog post based on the title and the idea here, and then writing it. And what it does is it takes in that plan, it takes in the initial context over here, and it takes in the transcript, and then it writes a draft of the blog post. So in this case, it's got 5 different angles which it thinks are worth drafting, and we have the outputs here. So here are all the blog posts. We can see that they're separated with a new heading, and they're all a really good starting point for a post which you could use to promote your blog post, promote your podcast, or to get more from that initial podcast content. So I hope that's useful.